Welcome to this meeting of Council. The meeting will be live streamed and recorded, and the voices and images of those participating in the meeting may be captured as part of this recording. Indigo Shire Council acknowledges the original custodians of these lands. The people of the rivers and the hills have walked these lands for thousands of years as well as today, and we pay respect to the elders of the past and present. As councillors, we have all taken an oath to carry out our duties in the best interests of the people of Indigo Shire and to do this in a fair and impartial manner. We are all committed to exercising the council's powers and functions to the best of our skills and judgment. Do we have any apologies and leaves of absence? So we have CEO.
I think you're about to call that Sally Rice is on leave, and Jess Reid is acting in her role tonight.
Thank you, CEO. Item 4, declarations of conflict of interest. Do we have any conflicts of interest with the agenda tonight? Councillor Dowsley.
Thank you. I have a general conflict of interest with item 11.3, adoption of the 25-26 budget, recommendation number 1.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. So when we get to that item, I'll ask you to restate your conflict and exit the room while we consider that item. Item 5 is open forum, and we have one set of questions received tonight in time for the open forum. Those questions are from Herb Ellerbock, and I can confirm that Herb is in the gallery. Council received approval from the Essential Services Commission to raise the Fair Go rate system rate cap from 3% to 7.54. However, accordingly, the figures in Council's 25-26 budget, average general rates will increase by 13% for 403 commercial industrial ratepayers, 12.2% for 6,309 residential ratepayers, 6.9% for 772 rural 2 ratepayers, and 3.1% for 334 residential vacant ratepayers. While for 1,586 rural 1 ratepayers, average general rates will decrease by 3.35%. This means 6,712, or over 71% of Indigo Shire ratepayers, will face average general rate increases that far exceed the approved increase cap when the express purpose of the Fair Go rate system is to protect households from excessive council rates increases. By making relatively small adjustments to the differential rates, council could have limited the average general rate increases for all ratepayers to no more than 6.9%, well below the approved cap. This could have been done without altering council's total general rate revenue or the long-term distribution of the rate burden. In a time of considerable economic strain, council had the opportunity to ease the financial burden for many Indigo Shire households, but declined to do so. The questions: why did council not alter the differential rates to produce a far more equitable outcome for ratepayers? And 2, why has council not complied with the already significantly increased rate cap for which it gained approval for all Indigo Shire ratepayers? Director of Planning and Corporate Services, Greg Pinkerton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Herb, for the question. Just to clarify, the change from 3% cap to 7.54 is to include into that the environmental management contribution. And so that's a revenue neutral change. Council doesn't actually receive any more income because of that. It's sort of written as though it was a rate cap increase. It's more of a transfer. So in answer to the question, the calculation in the question is difficult to follow. That's actually not how rates are calculated. The rate calculation method is set in legislation and clarified by the Essential Services Commission. And it appears here that there's some assumptions made in the calculation that give some strange results. So the statement here that 71% of the Shire's ratepayers will face average general rates far exceeding the approved cap is just incorrect. The suggestion that there could be a way of increasing the capped rate by 7.54% while the average is 6.9% just doesn't add up. So there's some calculation errors in there, but I can answer the questions. The first question is, why did council not alter the differential rates? So that's the dynamic differential model that's been presented to council several times. Council has looked at this. We've pulled it apart, looked at all of the ins and outs of that model, and it produces a less equitable outcome. The dynamic model is substantially unfair. It works by increasing the rates for people who lose wealth in order to subsidise the rates for people who gain wealth. And an example of that is that over the last couple of years, the dynamic differential rates model would have put farming rates up about 6% more than the council standard system. So it's not a fair model. In fact, it actually creates more unfairness. So this model's been presented a couple of times as an alternate to the normal rating system. And council's responded in a number of different documents over the last 18 months. And Herb, you'll remember that we had a very long conversation about it. So apart from repeating all of that, I'm not too sure what else can be said about that one. So that's the reason why council has not chosen to use that model. The second question is why council has not complied with the rate cap. The short answer to that is council has complied. The calculation method is one that's set in legislation, monitored and audited by the Essential Services Commission, and in setting the unit or the rates that are in the budget, that's been done using the Essential Services Commission's calculation method. So we actually use their compliance spreadsheet to set those rates. And I can tell you that we are at 0.01 less than the cap. So we're almost cent perfect on that one. But again, going back to the calculation method in this question seems to be something quite different. I think that covers it. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. As I said, that's the only set of questions that were received by 5 p.m. tonight, but I also want to raise a question on behalf of someone in the gallery tonight, Alan Pleitner. Alan emailed today asking if he could present to the council meeting on an item. I've responded to him to say that that's not something that we would have within our council meeting, but that he could have asked some questions to the open forum. That wasn't within the time frame that we would generally require, but Alan has driven all the way from Waganya, and so I think I understand the substance of the questions that you might have asked, Alan, and so I'm going to ask one question on your behalf, but I recognise that I will not get the essence of that question spot on as you would well have done, and so I'd ask for your leniency in that, and we'll do our best to get you an answer, and obviously that item that you're interested in is on the agenda tonight. So the question from Alan Pleitner is about the membership of the Active Indigo Grants panel, and why community membership on that panel is not being recommended going forward. So can I ask that question to the Acting Director of Community and Economic Development, Jess Reid?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. It's my understanding that the appointment of the community member term has expired this year, and in assessing the membership to the assessment panel, it was deemed that there were community organisation representatives on that panel, and that the strength in the governance and improvement of the assessment quality required that expertise there, and so we made the decision to move forward with not having that community representative this time around.
Thank you. CEO, you'd also like to give a response?
Thanks, Mayor Price, and welcome, Alan. Can I just add to that? I note, Mayor Price, that agenda item 12.3 talks about community development grant guidelines and assessment, which I guess is probably why Alan drove this way for that particular item. But as you'd be aware, with all of these agenda items, we do brief councils ahead of time, and a lot of questions and answers go into that process. And with the new council, not surprisingly for the first time, have a lot of questions about this, how it all fits in. And the reality is there is a grants governance policy that overarches the administration of our grants. So there's an overarching policy that sits above this agenda item. And the councillors have asked me to, well, we review the policy every 4 years, but councillors have asked me to bring forward that review of the policy to better understand the policy. The policy does have discussions about which grant panels we have, what their makeup should be, and so on. So if I can flag that sometime in the short coming few months, we will bring back to council a review of the entire policy and what the makeup is of all the panels, why there's certain mix of community and non-community members and things like that. Just to recap very quickly, when that policy was created, it was created with the backdrop of a local government inspectorate report. So the policy at the time was developed very much in keeping with recommendations from a report from the inspectorate. So it'd be useful to review the policy in its entirety, understand the background. We'll go through all that at a future date. And so these types of issues, and I think the questions and issues that Alan's raised will be discussed at that time.
Thank you, CEO. So again, thank you, Alan, for allowing us to accommodate a question for you in that way after some confusion today about whether you could address the meeting or not. We'll now move to item 6, community and council achievements. Do any councillors have a community or council achievement they'd like to raise? Councillor Horn.
I'd like to acknowledge a special occasion for one of our oldest businesses in Beechworth, which is also thought to be one of the 10 oldest newspapers around the nation. The Ovens and Murray Advertiser is proudly marking its 170th years of continuous publication after being founded at the end of 1854 in the Ovens goldfields, with its first edition being published on the 6th of January 1855. As one of the oldest regional and continuously published newspapers in Victoria, it has captured the town's rich history with a consistent voice through its present day operation. It was digitised by the Public Record of Victoria and can now be found online on Trove with records and is used by many researchers for historic information. Northeast Media in Wangaratta, a 4th generation publisher, has been the custodian of the historic masthead for more than 30 years, retaining independence, maintaining the trust and confidence of the community, and staying relevant. Northeast Media remains committed to the print edition, but also offers a digital edition since 2014, with online news helping to maintain options and choice. Our congratulations and best wishes for your efforts in keeping our communities up to date.
Thank you, Councillor Horn. Would any other councillor like to raise? Councillor Shepherd.
I'd like to congratulate long-term Wurrigi resident Sue Brunskill for her recent Order of Australia medal. She's a well-loved local community leader for more than 30 years in the area. She's an active member of the Wurrigi Landcare Group, and her knowledge, enthusiasm and optimism has helped farmers, lifestylers and gardeners understand they can quickly make a difference to biodiversity, erosion, weeds and water quality on their patch. She has an outstanding ability to connect people and ideas, and this award is well deserved. Congratulations, and we hope we had the opportunity to congratulate Sue in person at a future council meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Do any other councillors have any community and council achievements to recognise for the meeting? If not, we'll move to item 7, condolences. Do any councillors have any condolence motions to raise at the meeting tonight? Councillor Horn.
I wish to advise Council of the recent passing of a well-respected and valued member of the Rutherglen community, Mr. Max Jasper, at 88 years of age. After completing his studies at Dookie Agricultural College, Max took up a farming career and became very active in community life, including time spent at the Rutherglen Institute. He was a founding member of the Rutherglen Apex Club, where he served 2 terms as president and was awarded life membership. He then went on to help establish the Rotary Club of Rutherglen, where he again served as president and was then recognised with the prestigious Paul Harris Award. Max is probably best remembered for his lifetime commitment and active involvement, both as a board member and president of the Rutherglen District Hospital. He was instrumental in the very important transition of this building when it became the Glenview Nursing Home. And he'll be sadly missed and remembered when the new building is officially opened this Friday. I ask that a letter of condolence be sent under seal to his brother, Ken Jasper.
Thank you, Councillor Horn. I'd also like to raise a condolence motion with the meeting tonight for Diane Mangan. We were very saddened to hear of the tragic passing of Diane Mangan, a valued member of our Indigo community. Diane was a ceramic artist, a mentor to many, and an arts professional who made significant contributions to our creative community. She was an established and respected figure in our creative community, and her work will be remembered. Our thoughts are with her family and friends. And while this is a short condolence motion, I've been watching the outpouring of support to her family and friends, and beautiful posts remembering her on Facebook, and can really see the value that she provided to what is a very strong Beechworth arts community and the broader Indigo community. So similarly, if we could send a letter of condolence to her family under seal. Do we have any other condolence motions for the meeting tonight? Councillor Landells.
Yes, thanks, Madam Mayor. I'd like to provide a condolence for Annette Walton, who is a former Shire employee, and just condolences to her husband Andy, daughter Indigo, and her extended family and friends. And it's probably not usual that we do condolence motions for former staff, but I think Annette contributed incredibly strongly to the Indigo Shire community in her role, and I'll just outline some of her achievements. First of all, she worked at Indigo Shire in the youth development role full time from 2010 to 2015, and right throughout that time, she resided at Violet Town, which is about a 250-kilometre daily commute, round trip. And some of the, I guess, when I actually worked with Annette for 3 years, and I mean like worked in the same office with, a small team in the community development section, and as you do, you have the opportunity to just observe people and talk to them about how they go about their role and their values and that kind of thing. I think it's important to understand how Annette and her approach really changed the landscape for young people in Indigo Shire. An early observation is that Annette saw young people as potential, having great potential. She saw the opportunities to link young people across our Shire and then to get them working as productive teams. And she also saw them as an incredibly valuable resource, and a resource to be celebrated and invested in. So prior to Annette joining Indigo Shire, youth services in the Shire really were a bit of a reflection of the geographical layout of the Shire, where we had a number of towns all 10 or 15 kilometres apart, and small groups of people keen and active, but not really connecting very well right across the Shire. So there used to be little programs run in each town, and that was kind of about the extent, but not too much right across. When Annette came on board, she, I guess she saw a few things. Number one, she saw opportunities to connect, and she looked, for example, at 5 skate parks and said, well, here's where we could create a circuit. So we don't just have individual events at each skate park. We actually connect these, and you get points for participation in each event, and then that can aggregate points would be kept, and so on. Momentum. So it created like a genuine circuit of events. And this encouraged social and recreational engagement across the Shire. She also, so this then became what's, I think it's now certainly the initial branding of that was the Northeast Skate and Scooter Series. And then she also worked with the young people to host these events and organise them. And she brought her extensive background in arts and live music to this model so that each circuit always had a live music component with young local musicians getting the opportunity to perform, as well as take on the key roles of sound and lighting, emceeing, etc. Now, if I look at Indigo Shire in the sort of recreational space, I think we have about 7 teams that are all playing the TDFL. So if you're into sport, you have that opportunity to do footy, netball in most communities. But if you're not into sport and you're into more arts, well, there wasn't a whole lot for you before Annette came on board. So with some of these new initiatives, all of a sudden the artistically inclined young people were suddenly front and centre at a lot of events and really celebrated in their communities. So this model became so successful that Alpine Shire were knocking on the door and they said, hey, we've got 3 skate parks, we want to join. So Annette had worked very collaboratively to bring on board the Alpine Shire, and then we also had other adjoining shires to Indigo, also keen to have events included in this circuit. This was also at a time when Facebook was relatively new. So Annette saw the potential of Facebook to connect young people right across the Shire, which was just very consistent with what the Northeast Skate and Scooter Series was doing. So she set up the first Indigo Shire Youth Facebook page and was a moderator of that page. And I think it's really been a great initiative. And it's also, it's not lost on me the fact that when you're a moderator of a Facebook page with, connecting young people, that goes well beyond, that moderation role goes well beyond a 9-to-5 job. So she would often be needing to just keep an eye on that, at all hours of the day. I think under her leadership and highly innovative approach, the youth programs have really transformed in a short time here in Indigo Shire from what we had, which was a difficult, isolated logistical challenge, to a best practice benchmark right across the state that successfully blended arts and recreation. So I just sort of think that these are the areas where I think what she did as an employee was really over and above what most employees would be expected to do in their role, because she really walked in and picked up the services and took them to a level that was really unprecedented, and I might add has been maintained by subsequent youth development officers, including the current team. And that's a great legacy that I think that she leaves youth services in this Indigo Shire, but even widely throughout Northeast Victoria. So yes, I would just like to give that context to Annette's role and just valet Annette Walton.
Thank you, Councillor Landels. Would any other councillor like to raise a condolence motion tonight? No, we'll go on to item 8, confirmation of minutes from previous meetings. The recommendation is that the minutes of the council meeting held on the 13th of May 2025, as published on council's website, be confirmed. Can I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Shepherd, seconded Councillor Harvey. Councillor Shepherd, would you like to speak to the motion? Councillor Harvey? If no one else would like to speak, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Landels, are you raising your hand for all those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 9 is business arising from previous minutes. Then there's a question that was submitted to open forum that was taken on notice listed there. Item 10 is petitions, and CO, can I confirm there are none?
Nil, Mayor Price.
Item 11 is planning and corporate services, and item 11.1 is community vision and council plan 2025 to 2029. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that council, having reviewed submissions, adopts the Indigo Shire Community Vision and Council Plan 2025 to 2029. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Burke, seconded Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Burke.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'm glad to support the motion to adopt the community vision and council plan that was prepared as a part of the budget process. And it's as my first time on council, it was very interesting and insightful to see the amount of work that goes into it and the things that the view that we can take of what our community is going to look like in the future. And it's good that we get that feedback. And it's great that we receive some thoughtful feedback during the consultation, especially about climate change, protecting nature and planning for young children. That feedback helped make the final plan even better. But I must say I was a bit disappointed that only 4 people made formal submissions. These plans are really important. They help to shape the future of our towns and communities. The more people who get involved, the stronger and more useful these plans become. And often when I'm talking to people in our community, they'll often say, I think we should do this, or I think we should be doing that. And that's the time, in the time of our council vision and plan, that's when the community can share their ideas. It helps make sure that the plan reflects what people actually want and need. So I hope next time more people take the chance to have their say. I commend the motion to the council.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Councillor Shepherd, would you like to speak as seconder?
And while people perhaps didn't in the draft give us many submissions, there were, during the engagement, 1,900 visits to the engaged Indigo platform, with 284 people actively contributing via one or more of the engagement tools. So 260 surveys, 121 contributions to the ideas board, and 41 pins dropped on an interactive map. So I agree, it would be great to have more people reading it once the draft's there, but I'd just like to say how fantastic it is that the community are very much involved in this process, and they did have an opportunity to put in what they thought we should be doing for the next 4 years. And just to be really clear that this plan is the fundamental document now for our councillors and our council going forward for the next 4 years. It's our work plan, and the community has told us what that work plan is, and they've been pretty much involved in the in creating it. And if you read this document, everything I'm reading in the document, I'm nodding to, because I've seen most things are reflected from what the community's concerns were. So I'd just like to agree. I'd like to commend this to our council and congratulate our staff too for the great work they've done on collating all those submissions, listening to us for 2 days, then creating a draft, and then really listening to those 4 submitters of their submissions and changing the document to reflect their concerns or their changes. So big job, and really appreciate the 2 Mels and anyone else that might have been adding to that process.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Dowsley.
Thank you. As I commented in May, the Community Vision and Council Plan are key strategic documents, also as mentioned by Councillor Shepherd, required under the Local Government Act, but more importantly, they guide Council's strategic direction and action plans for the next 4 years. Everything we do should relate back to our collective vision and council plan. I would like to acknowledge the extensive community engagement that has occurred in defining our vision and plan, from those that contributed upfront at community markets or completion of our surveys to those that gave specific feedback on the draft. I am personally inspired by our collective vision for Indigo, and I'm looking forward to tackling our strategic objectives through advocacy, capital and operational projects and grant submissions.
Thank you, councillor Dowsley. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Landels.
Yes, thank you. Just touching on the engagement numbers a little bit, I think it probably reflects while we didn't get a whole lot of formal submissions. These days, engagement come about in a whole range of different ways, and I think that our staff have been really, they've obviously got a high level of expertise in that area, and have used the various different options for people, because sometimes people just want to just engage for a few minutes at a market or something like that to give some ideas. So there's certainly a lot of flexibility there in the way people can contribute. Also, I think, sometimes in local government, a thing occurs which is called over-consulting, which is council has so many other plans, a lot of which are integrated into a council plan. And, people are constantly being consulted about those plans and master plans and place plans, etc. So it's quite possible that, I think we just have to be really grateful for the people that do, we give them the opportunity, the people that do contribute. It's really important that we acknowledge the time and effort they took to do that. And, it's at the end of the day, as other councils have said, this is our blueprint for the next 4 years. And it's a very important document. And, and I just commend particularly the staff that have put in so much effort into collating the document, because there's an enormous amount of work involved in that. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Landels. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? I'd just like to add my comments as well. It is, as the councillors have said, a really important process that we go through, and one that I have ever increasing confidence in when I see the work that goes into getting that much engagement from the community right at the beginning of the process. And so I would commend the staff that have worked on this to say thank you for showing our community a very clear process which begins to build a document that will be our work plan for the next 4 years. And so similarly with Councillor Dowsley, I'm quite energised by seeing what the community vision and the council plan is, and I look forward to working towards that over the next 4 years. I will now go back to Councillor Burke if you'd like to sum up.
No, that's all. Thanks.
I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 11.2 is consideration of the 2025-26 budget submissions.
Point of order, Madam Mayor.
What's your point of order?
I have a notice of motion to be debated before we move on to this next item.
So sorry, councillor, what is the point of order?
Point of order is that I have a notice of motion.
That's not explicitly a point of order. So what are you asking for? I don't think what you're asking for is a point of order. So what are you asking for, councillor Horn?
I'm asking that item 15.1, notice of motion, be debated before the next item.
So what you're asking for is to put a motion to have an item in the agenda brought forward. Is that right? So that's not a point of order. You're asking for the agenda to be adjusted. Is that right?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, CEO, can I confirm the way that this would take place is, do we need a motion from council to consider an adjustment to the agenda and to bring forward this item?
The governance rules are silent on when you ask for it, but it does require a motion of council to change the agenda order.
Okay, so councillor Horn, the request is to bring forward the notice of motion item, which is item 15, to where in the agenda?
To now.
To be heard now.
This position, yes, to be debated before this item.
Okay, so I've got a mover for that. Councillor Horn, you're the mover. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Harvey is the seconder. CEO, can I confirm, is there any debate on this discussion, or I think it's a procedural motion, so it would just be put to the vote. So I would ask now, I'm going to put it to the vote. I want to be really clear with councillors what it is. It's a procedural motion whereby councillor Horn's notice of motion, which is originally listed at item 15, be brought forward to be considered now before item 11.2 and 11.3. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Councillors, I'll give you a moment now to go to your papers to item 15, where we will now consider councillor Horn's notice of motion. I'm going to take it now that everyone has navigated their way through to that notice of motion. And I will read out the motion. Actually, councillor Horn, I might ask you to put your motion to the meeting.
I don't have it in front of me.
Okay, I'll read your motion to the meeting. So the notice of motion is titled Urgent Budget Reallocation. The motion is that Council 1 reallocate between $350,000 and $400,000 from discretionary items in the 2025-26 budget to provide targeted, time-limited financial relief for ratepayers experiencing hardship due to recent levy increases and economic stress. And 2, request the CEO report back with recommendations for implementation, including eligibility and fund structure. Councillor Horn, you would like to move that motion?
I would, yes, thank you.
Can I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Harvey, you've seconded. Councillor Horn, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm certain, like me, you've all put a great deal of thought into the extra burden the emergency service levy has placed on every household and business across our shire in the wake of 5 relentless years of unmitigated challenges. I felt compelled to go deeper to explore what more we could do. So today I'm asking you to support this motion and ask our CEO to develop a practical, timely and targeted plan to deliver assistance. This isn't about capital works and balance sheets. It's about the lives, livelihoods and the dignity of our neighbours, of our local business owners, the very social fabric that binds our communities. Across our region, people are already having to make impossible decisions. Which animals do I have to euthanize? Which vineyard will I need to mothball? What staff member will I have to let go? And for some, the most painful of all, how can I go on? These are not just jobs. They're families, school fees, groceries, survival. And it's not about just landholders. Small business operators, your cafe owner, your mechanic, your local hairdresser are facing the same very questions. How can I afford to keep going? Yes, there's lots of assistance available. A $5,000 grant does sound generous until you realise you have to spend the money first and then wait to claim it back. If you're trucking loads of fodder from Western Australia or wherever, you don't have weeks, you need help now. The freight costs alone are crushing, and without immediate, local and real support, many won't last the winter. By reallocating just 1% of our $40 million budget to create a hardship relief fund, we can make this happen. Food and fuel vouchers distributed by Agbiz Assist, small business grants, rate deferrals, emergency support for livestock feed or water. This is a hand up, not a handout. We have committed over $3.5 million to tourism this year. Important projects, no doubt, but we've got to ask ourselves some questions. What is the hierarchy of needs? How can we fund the expansion of tourist experiences with altruistic projects when others are in survival mode and when our neighbours could lose everything they've worked so hard for? I ask you to please support this motion, support the people who put us here, not with sentiment, but with strategy. No one is going to remember how we did it, but they will remember that their council stood with its people when they needed us most. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horn. Councillor Harvey, would you like to speak as seconder?
Yes, just briefly. we are all aware that local government is lobbying both state and federal government for relief. To me, the cost of living at the moment is, in my lifetime, unprecedented. But we can't really wait for the state and federal governments to come across. I think we have the resources to do something more immediate. And even if we have to postpone, not cancel certain things, we could just postpone them a little bit. And it's up to us to show the community that we're actually doing something constructive and practical for them. So I commend this motion to you. Thank you.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Shepherd.
Can I ask a question? So 350 to 400,000 from discretionary items. It's one of the tightest budgets I've ever been involved in. So I'm just wondering where that money is going to come from.
Well, I think that we should leave that to the CEO to come up with that number. I did make some suggestions that it come out of the tourism budget in some way. But yeah, I'm happy for the CEO to find other places where it may come from.
Can I ask another question? So up until recently, we've been building this budget ourselves. So I'm wondering why at this late moment we're bringing this up. Like, where else could, I suppose it's so tightly done, this budget now. Where could we have got $350,000 from while we were discussing this earlier as a council group? So it would have been great if this was an issue that you saw coming up, that it was raised during those discussions so we could build a budget around that. I just can't see, commendable though it is to give people money, how we're going to take this out of a budget that we have worked quite hard to scrimp and save and create it to fit, I suppose, all the items that we have to get done. If it was a more, yeah, so sorry, why, I shouldn't keep continuing, I should just ask the question, why wasn't this raised while we were building the budget so we could build it in?
I was further motivated to look into this situation after Rural Councils Victoria recommended that local government get involved in this issue. And yeah, I think that it's a desperate situation that we need to have a look at. And as I say, I can't see the reality of taking money to expand our tourism offerings when other people are in desperate situations.
Can I ask another question? So perhaps to the CEO, can we afford to take 350,000, although this brings you into the debate? So it's probably not a good question to you, really. Perhaps to the Director of Planning and Corporate Services might be, can you see $350,000 coming out of tourism? Have you looked at tourism and seen where you could take that? Or you think CEO is to speak to it? Yeah.
Councillor Shepherd, I'm just going to be careful how I answer because I'll be half answering, I'll be half entering the debate. So I'll try to be factual. There is no discretionary money available for this. The tourism offerings aren't being expanded. That's incorrect. The dollar amounts, I'll just try and be factual. The dollar amounts that are referred to in the motion refer to operational budgets, current budgets, which are budgets that fund our current staff. So we're talking about things like staff in the building here who support tourism, as well as our visitor information centres, the cultural precincts and so on. So they're all salary based, so there's no availability to free up money from there. for this motion, nor is there anywhere else in the budget that has any discretionary amounts. We have no reserves and we have no discretionary amounts for this. So basically it means people's jobs or something like that.
Thank you, CEO. Councillor Shepherd, did you have any other questions or would you like to speak to the motion now?
I do have a question. So is there another way of us assisting people through hardship that are doing it tough at the moment, which I get the impression is you're speaking to small business and agriculture, Councillor Horn. Is there any other way that we don't spend $350,000 of money we don't have? And I don't know who that question would be to. Perhaps again to the CEO.
CEO?
So, again, trying to be factual, I do note there was a reference to RCV, and what a lot of councils are doing are a whole range of things, not necessarily trying to find cash to hand back to drought-affected farmers, but to try to find ways to lobby, to advocate, to connect farmers with who need assistance. They might be mental health assistance or financial advice and things like that. There are a range of drought packages available and we're communicating those to as much as we can. So there's a lot of lobbying, advocating, connecting, networking and a range of things like that. We do have hardship policies available for those that are struggling to pay their rates. So we certainly would encourage people to talk to us and talk about how we can spread things over time. So there's hardship policies, there's also a range of lobbying and advocacy as well. And I'd be happy to bring back, if council so choose, to a future council meeting, a whole list of different activities we already are undertaking or could undertake in as an alternative to trying to find a way to find cash if that was desired.
Okay, Councillor Shepherd.
One more question.
One more question.
To Councillor Horn. What is the main thing you'd be wanting to give people that are under hardship at the moment, which is small business and agriculture, is the impression I'm hearing from your motion. So is it lumps, like the other thing is this motion is unclear to me how we would spend that money. I know you're asking the CEO to find it, but I want to hear from you really what you're asking for in this spend. So whether I will support it or not.
Very much like the bushfires and during COVID, people were actually struggling to put food on their tables and to put petrol in their cars. So that would be one way of really assisting people. But the biggest need is for people to actually have cash to pay for the fodder to be delivered to their places. So, I just want to stress the fact that we are spending money on things that could be deferred and that are not critical to people's everyday lives.
Okay. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Dowsley.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I have to be honest, I'm a bit confused about this motion. I've heard cost of living, I've heard drought assistance, and I've heard relief from the Emergency Services and Volunteers Fund levy. All three issues are enormous. They're real, but they're also outside the remit of local government. We've referenced a couple of times Rural Councils Victoria, and they do have a drought task force, which has recommended key priorities from rural councils in Victoria. One of those priorities is around seeking funding from state government for local councils to run some initiatives that, like the CEO has mentioned. In that drought task force briefing, they also talk about the cost of fodder and some limitations on actually obtaining fodder and some of the things they're trying to change, like relaxing rules to bring fodder out of WA into Victoria. So all of those things are being advocated for at the Rural Councils Victoria level. I'm going to comment on the motion, which specifically talks about the Emergency Services and Volunteers Fund levy. So I understand times are tough for our ratepayers, whether they be homeowners, business owners or farmers. The state government has implemented several new taxes that are disproportionately impacting our rural communities at a time when we are facing an escalating drought crisis. The Emergency Services and Volunteers Fund levy is one of those taxes, and I'm strongly opposed to its implementation. Having said that, it is blatant cost shifting for the state government to impose a new tax and then local government provide financial relief for that tax. We are simply not in a financial position to offer financial assistance to offset this levy. There is no discretionary items in the budget, in my opinion. In fact, our budget already includes borrowings of 1.6 million. The Victorian Government's recent response to the parliamentary inquiry into local government funding and services offers little meaningful action for rural councils facing mounting financial pressure. Of the 48 recommendations in the inquiry, only 9 were fully supported by the government. Whilst I won't support this motion, we do need systemic reform to address cost shifting, something that is not being addressed by the state government. This is another example of cost shifting. They impose a tax, then we have to provide relief for it. It doesn't make sense. I will continue to advocate for the withdrawal of the Emergency Services and Volunteers Fund levy. It is unfair. And for ongoing financial sustainability measures to support local government so that we can better support our communities.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Burke.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. First, I want to thank Councillor Horn, who has raised this motion. It's clear she cares deeply about local farmers, small business and others who are struggling right now. I care too, and we all care about it. And I know many people are finding it harder to pay their bills, especially with this new emergency levy in the middle of a cost of living crisis. Last night, there was an item on Channel 7 about a dairy farmer who is now working 18 hours every day with no relief because he can't afford to pay his staff. And he talked about the stress he was going through. So we all see the strain on our farmers. But while I agree with the concern of this motion, I can't support the motion. The idea is to set up a 300,000 to 400,000 hardship fund to help people doing it tough. That sounds helpful, but there are some real problems. For starters, 400, let's say it's 400,000. That's 9, 10 semi-trailer loads full of hay. That might go across 3 or 4 farmers per semi-trailer. So there's 30 or 40 people we can help. The issue is bigger than that if we were to do something like fodder. So there's some real problems with this process. So for starters, council doesn't have the staff or systems to run something like this fairly and properly. We'd have to take money away from other important things like fixing roads, running community facilities, or creating jobs through our tourism program. All this kind of help, like rate relief or drought support, is really the state government's job. And I agree with Councillor Dowsley's point around this cost shifting, that the state government already runs support programs and have much bigger budgets than local councils do, and they have an infrastructure to be able to do this. If we step in, it could set a bad example where the state starts expecting councils to pay for things that the state should be funding. There's also the problem of fairness. How do we decide who gets help and who doesn't? Should my neighbour get more help than someone else's neighbour? Without clear rules, people might miss out or feel treated unfairly. That said, I do think council can still help in other ways. We can certainly promote our existing payment plans and hardship options so people know what support is available. There are also state programs for farmers, small businesses and people in crisis, like those offered by Small Business Victoria and organisations like AgBiz Assist in their rural financial counselling service. And I know AgBiz Assist is standing there ready, willing and able to help for these people that we want to support, but they are best to do that. So we should keep pointing people to those services and keep advocating for more funding for the groups that run them. So while I really do respect the intent of this motion, I don't think it's the right approach for council. We need to stay focused on what we can do well and make sure we're helping in ways that really work.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? I'd just like to reiterate some of what my fellow councillors have said. I'm on the board of Rural Councils Victoria, and certainly we were very pleased to be welcomed onto the drought task force by the state government. Premier, our deputy chair, Kate Macon, made the appropriate recommendations to the Premier, and that's exactly where the drought support should fit. We shouldn't welcome or encourage further cost shifting from state and federal governments. They already are looking to do enough of that themselves. There's only so many services that local governments can provide, and the bulk of the services for Australia should be provided by the state and federal governments, and this is one of those services. I don't, as Councillor Burke has said, there's not one person in this room that doesn't see the issues that Councillor Horn has raised as significant and as something that we need to do something about. The difference being that our role in this space is largely advocacy and connecting people with the appropriate programs and departments for them to go and find assistance through. If that assistance is not there, then again, our role is to advocate to the state and federal government to make sure that the appropriate funding is provided to be able to assist these people. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Otherwise, I'll go back to Councillor Horn if you'd like to sum up. Councillor Horn.
As I said, this motion is not about numbers. It's about our neighbours. It's about the farmer who can't feed his stock and the vineyard about to lose their vines, and small business owner who's weighing up which staff they have to let go. The ask was for less than 1% of our budget to provide real targeted relief, not in 6 months, not when the next grant opens, but now. This is about being the kind of council that doesn't just talk about resilience, but actually delivers it. I think it's measured, it's practical, and it sends a powerful message that when our people are under pressure, we step up. I understand all of the points that you've raised and appreciate that it is a very, very difficult situation. Thank you very much.
Okay, councillors, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? The motion has failed. Do I need to recall those names, Theo? Great, thank you. So those that voted for the motion was Councillor Harvey, Councillor Horn, and against was Councillor Dowsley, Price, Shepherd, Burke, Landells. We'll now go back to item 11.2, consideration of the 2025-26 budget submissions. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council 1 receives the attached draft budget responses and thanks submitters for their assistance and feedback. 2 endorses the management responses detailed in this report in relation to the budget requests. 3 makes no financial changes to the budget as a result of the submissions, and 4 notes that council staff will respond to each submitter with a copy of this report and the council resolution. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Dowsley, seconded Councillor Harvey. Councillor Dowsley.
Thank you, Mayor. It was very pleasing to hear that 139 people downloaded the draft budget. Of those 139 people, 5 made submissions on the draft. But this is very much like the council plan and vision that we talked about earlier, in that a lot of the feedback comes through before the draft is actually released. So there would have been a lot more of engagement than these 5 formal submissions. I'd like to just briefly share my thoughts and feedback on those 5 submissions that were made. In regards to the community sustainability grants, I too query the alignment of our grant program with the wider objectives contained within the council plan, and I'll address this in a subsequent agenda item tonight. In regards to new footpaths, I appreciate that the community has limited options for raising requests with council, such as new footpaths. I acknowledge the budget, along with petitions, are 2 such methods for these to be raised. And I agree that this project should now be prioritised according to our asset management plans. In regards to landfill rehabilitation, I do understand that finalising the rehabilitation of these sites has not necessarily been a priority of council for a few years, but that these sites are regularly monitored and we are meeting all of our obligations in regards to these landfill sites. I'm also keen for further discussions on this topic and will follow up for further updates separate to tonight's budget meeting. In regards to the offer of in-kind support from Yak Tracks, I would like to acknowledge and thank Yak Tracks for their submission and note their in-kind contributions should be considered when a project manager is appointed to the Yakananda Pump Track project. We've already commented on the alternate rating strategy earlier in the open forum questions. So I won't comment any further on that, but just wanted to say thank you to those people that submitted their comments. And I'm happy to endorse this item.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. Councillor Harvey, would you like to speak as seconder?
Yes, thank you. As a new councillor, I just like to say I was very impressed by the very hard work that the staff put into this and the many hours and trying to explain to us as new councillors what it was all about. You know, I'd just like to assure the community that we did work on this for many, many hours and they were talked about it an awful lot. And I think it's a very good budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you. I remember a while ago, we used to get lots of submissions at this stage, and it was difficult because we'd already worked out the budget really. And we'd be asked for many different big item things that just did not fit. And so we discussed how that didn't work. So I'd like to commend the staff again for listening to us back then and changing the way that we engage the community around the budget. So the community, again, are asked way back 6 months before we do the budget on what are the big issues that they see are a concern. And we listen to that. It then goes to all of our heads of departments who have to include their concerns in the budget. And I think the fact that we only get 5 now and they're reasonable what they're asking, I think reflects the fact that this is an improved process. So I'd just like to say thank you to the submitters, but also thank you to all those people that said something 6 months beforehand as well and gave us that really strong outline on what you did want to see in the budget.
Councillor Burke, would you like to speak?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I think that the thing that I found when just looking at this whole budget and where we are at the moment is that I was really annoyed that with as we're going through this budget right at the very end, that what the state government has forced our community to pay more in rates just to fund their new levy. They impose this increase on us, yet don't cap their own taxes. When I speak to people from our community, there seems confusion about the impact of the rate cap. So I want to talk about that rate cap that is placed on every council in Victoria and why it's causing problems for small regional budgets like ours. On page 117 of the budget pack, there's a very clear chart showing our costs rising while our income is capped. So just let me explain that just as simply as I can. Imagine you run a farm.
Councillor Burke, can I just check, are these comments in relation to the budget submissions or to the budget itself? I just don't...
The budget itself.
Yeah, so we're at the budget submissions at this stage. So if you... I thought that was...
Sorry.
That's okay. So I might ask if anyone else would like to speak to the motion and allow you to hold those comments for that item, if that's okay.
Sorry.
Any other... Councillor Horn?
This year, we received just 5 submissions in response to the draft budget. And previous years, we've seen as many as 30, and some years none at all. So while the number is smaller this time, and every one of those submissions matters, and every voice is appreciated, it's also worth noting that not all submissions result in changes. In fact, it's not uncommon for none to be formally adopted. But that doesn't mean the effort is wasted, far from it. We appreciate the care, the detail and the consideration that went into these contributions. One submission in particular stood out for me, a proposal to rework our rating strategy. It aims to better balance the burden across the 5 property categories. It's a complex concept and not an easy one for people to wrap their heads around, but it has real merit. It made me reflect on how long it must have taken people to accept that the world isn't flat. Sometimes the truth takes time to come to catch on, but that doesn't mean we should stop considering it. And to all future submitters, I encourage you to engage with the pre-budget surveys that go out earlier in the term. That's where you can help shape the conversation from the ground up. So to those who took the time this year, thank you. We see you, we hear you, and your input. This helps us do better.
Thank you, Councillor Horn. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Landels.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to thank each of the submitters who put forward suggestions for the budget, and some of them have been incorporated into the budget and some haven't, but I note that those that haven't, we've made a note that we'll consider them for future programs. And one of those was a new footpath for Douglas Street in Rutherglen, and I think I'd just like to highlight that I think that whilst we're quite good in giving a year ahead view, if you like, for a budget about what our plans are for improving the footpath networks around our communities, it would be good to see a longer term, medium to longer term plans around footpath networks. And I do note that it was only 2 or 3 months ago that a petition came to council from a group in Waganya who are also seeking a footpath. And I'd like to think that whilst it's great that we have some grassroots opportunities for groups in the community to put forward projects they'd like to see to improve these things, I'd like to think that we were also working in a really proactive way to identify these needs in the community and put them into a professional document, I guess. It's got transparency and is a public document.
Thank you, Councillor Landels. I'll go back to you, Councillor Dowsley, as the mover, if you'd like to sum up.
Nothing further from me.
I'll now put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 11.3 is adoption of the 2025-26 budget, and recommendation 1 is the next recommendation that I'll read out. Councillor Dowsley.
Thank you. I have a general conflict of interest with this item because prior to being elected to council, I contributed to a grant application for the Yakananda Chamber of Commerce regarding funding for a refresh of Yakananda's High Street public toilets.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. I'll ask you to leave the room and welcome you back in at the end of this item. Councillors, the item is for decision. The recommendation 1 is that council approves the High Street Yakananda public toilet project contained in the attached budget documents. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Burke, seconded Councillor Harvey. Councillor Burke, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, thanks, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Harvey, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, thank you.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Shepherd.
Yakandanda, I can't remember what the group was that applied for that funding, but they didn't get the funding. So it's sitting there in the budget now. Rather than take it out because we don't have that funding, we'll leave it there to be reviewed if there can be, it's still a priority. So if there can be other funding outsourced from another grant, we'll seek that. But if not, we will review that and at the next time the budget comes to us and it may be removed or it may stay there.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? I would just say that Perhaps we should have picked this up earlier, given that this grant has been announced for quite some time and it could have been removed at an earlier stage. I'm similarly comfortable that it stays in at this late stage, and that we can keep an eye on other funding, but might look to reallocate this money if there's no other funding that's been found at an appropriate stage. If there's no one else who'd like to speak to the motion, I will put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Could we please invite Councillor Dowsley back into the room? So we're still on item 11.3, adoption of the 2025-26 budget. We now move on to the second part of the recommendation, the second recommendation. This next recommendation goes for almost 2 pages. I won't read the whole lot, but I will read some of it. The recommendation is that Council, having given public notice and having received and considered submissions, adopts the attached 2025-26 budget, including the budgeted financial statements as defined by the Local Government Finance and Reporting Regulations 2014, to the fees and charges for 2025-26 as listed in the attached 2025-26 budget be effective from the 1st of July 2025. 3, the Chief Executive Officer or delegate gives public notice of this decision to adopt the following: A, 2025-26 budget, and B, 2025-26 10-year financial plan, and C, 2025-26 revenue and rating plan. Those are just the first 3 items within that second recommendation. There's also item 4A and B, item 5, 6.1, 6.2, 6A, B, C, 6.3 talks about municipal charge, 6.4 waste management charges, 7 goes on to talk about payment options, 8 is titled consequential, 9 is borrowings, and finally, over onto the third page of this recommendation is item 10. As I say, I won't continue to read out the remainder of that recommendation, councillors. Can I now ask that somebody please move this item? Moved Councillor Burke, seconded Councillor Dowsley. Councillor Burke.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. My apologies, I got my notes mixed up. I thought I was being very organised tonight. Okay, so the thing that comes through in my first budget was the discussions around the rate cap and the impact that is having on council funding and our ability to spend money. And the state government's just made it worse, of course, by putting in on their new levy. Whilst that's been, we've had a rate increase provided because of that. Certainly from a community point of view, there is a lot of confusion. So as I was saying before, that there is a chart in the budget pack that clearly shows our costs rising while our income is capped. And just to explain it quite simply, I've used 2 analogies here. One is running a farm where every year your costs go up: fuel, fertiliser, seeds, wages, maintenance, they all go up. But the government, they might say to you, you can only increase your income 3% no matter what happens in your business. And what happens is at first you cope, but over time you stop fixing things, you work longer, the farm starts to suffer. That's on a farm. Now, in a business, it's much the same. So if you have a cafe and your prices for the costs of the milk and the beans, the electricity and wages, if they rise, but then you're told that you can only lift your prices by 3%, soon you do only the things that you can do. And that is you cut hours of the operating of the shop, you skip your maintenance, you certainly sack people, and you stop replacing gear. So basically you cut your costs to fit the revenue. So what's happening with councils now is that state legislation says we can't raise rates more than 3%, even though the costs for roads, waste, pools and parks, they're rising faster than 3%. And a lot of those costs are out of our control because it's other issues and other things are causing those costs to rise. So as noted in the budget pack, after 10 years of this, council is now permanently about 6% behind the true cost of service delivery. So that's every year now. So that means delaying roadworks, or so if we have to manage this without rate increase, we have to find areas to cut. State and federal governments don't face this tax cap. They just raise more tax. Councils can't do that, and the gap between the costs we have and the revenue we have keeps growing. Even though this is happening, council is delivering. Staff are doing more with less. They've already found savings. They've delayed projects and cut costs, but that can't go on forever. If this continues, we'll all notice older buildings, fewer upgrades, longer delays in repairs, and cuts to services and grants. So when we talk about a rate cap, it's not just capping what the Shire ratepayers pay, it's capping what Shire residents receive. It's a cap on roadworks, pool maintenance, and improving our towns. Thanks,
Thank you,
Mayor.
Councillor Burke. I'll now go to the seconder. Councillor Dowsey, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. When adopting the draft budget for exhibition in May, I said I was committed to turning the vision and priorities outlined in our strategic documents and master plans into real tangible outcomes. I also said I was passionate about ensuring fairness in how project funding is distributed across our Shire, and I'd hope to make a meaningful impact on this in my first year as a councillor. However, the reality has been much more complex. Like most councils, possibly even all councils across Victoria, Indigo Shire faces significant financial pressures, as Councillor Burke has just talked about, including rate capping and also including cost shifting from state and federal governments, which we've also talked about tonight as well. This year's budget is heavily constrained. Rising costs, urgent building maintenance that potentially has been put off from previous years, and commitments made by the previous council are all items that are largely outside of my control or influence. Whilst I'm somewhat disappointed that I haven't been able to influence change in my first year, I do accept that it is going to take more than one budget cycle to fix some of these strategic issues. I support the adoption of the current budget and I look forward to getting on with it and moving forward.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsey. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Shepherd?
Since the draft budget went out, we do have $250,000 from the state government. So whilst we're not happy with them about some areas, we're pretty happy with the $250,000 for the Yakandana Pump Park. So that is, we'd like more of those. More of those surprise grants would be fantastic.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? I'd just like to say that this has been a very solid budget build, that it is not lost on me the journey that staff have to take us on to make sure that we can appropriately consider everything that the community raises with us through this one process. We hear from community all throughout the year, but it is really important that it is all consolidated into this process, and I'm very confident that that has happened. I'm always disappointed that more of what the community asks for can't be included, but that is the nature of local government and in a rate capped environment, with more and more cost shifting from state and federal governments. So I'm really pleased with what we can do with what we have, and I look forward to seeing lots of this work eventuate over the next 12 months and continuing the discussion with our community about what can be in the budget and how we continue to strengthen our budget process. I'll now go back to Councillor Burke. Would you like to sum up?
No, that's all. Thanks.
I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Yes. Item 11.4, the May 2025 Finance Report. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council accepts the May 2025 Finance Report, noting the progress against Council's mid-year forecast. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Burke, seconded Councillor Harvey. Councillor Burke.
Nothing to add.
Councillor Harvey, would you like to speak as second?
Nothing to add as well.
Councillor Dowsley.
Yeah, sorry. No comments on the specific May finance report, but I think something that we probably forgot to mention in the previous item and this item. So for the budgeting and the ongoing financial reports, this takes a lot of work from our internal finance team. We need to thank them for all of the work that they put into not only the annual budget, but also the ongoing monthly reporting.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Shepherd.
This was also part of the budget, which I thought was an interesting list of active management of council's financial performances. And this particular item that we get at each meeting with the finance report is part of a report to Council's Finance Committee, monthly reporting to Council's ordinary meeting, quarterly reporting to the Council's Audit Committee, quarterly exception reporting to Council, mid-year budget review and forecasting for the second half of the year, annual close process and audit by Vargo. So we keep a very close eye on our spending and our budget, and this particular report just reflects that.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. If any other councillor would like to speak to the motion, if not, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 11.5 is 46 Oak Avenue, Beechworth. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council resolves to grant a notice of decision to grant a permit for use and development of the land for a store in the mixed-use zone at 46 Oak Avenue, Beechworth, subject to the following conditions. There are almost 2 pages of conditions. I'll read you the headings to those. There's endorsed plans, compliance with endorsed plans, amenity, residential amenity, all goods stored internally, prohibited storage, connection to services, no parking in Castle Lane, sealed site, compliance with storm report, neat and tidy site, car parking, loading and unloading, parking on nearby roads, time limits, permit expiry, use and development. So each of those items that I've just read out is a subheading, and underneath those there are conditions. There are 13 of them. I don't intend to read them out. They are almost 2 pages. Can I have somebody to move that motion, please? Moved Councillor Dowsley, seconded Councillor Harvey. Councillor Dowsley.
Thank you, Mayor. One of my own personal core values is fairness, and as such, I have a real issue with approving permits retrospectively. I just don't see it as being fair for those ratepayers that follow the defined process. In this case, the recommendation offers no repercussion for knowingly circumventing a defined legislated process. In fact, in some ways, the applicant is rewarded by not having to submit a comprehensive site analysis under clause 1501 2S and construction management plans because it's already constructed under clause 5318 stormwater management. In addition, this proposal received 4 objections, and I carefully considered whether these objections contained valid reasons for refusal or whether additional conditions could or should have been applied as a result of those objections. On reviewing the objections, I'm not satisfied that different or additional conditions would have been applied to the permit had it been submitted prior to construction. As such, and given a store is an entirely acceptable use within the mixed-use zone, I reluctantly agree with the recommendation to approve the planning permit.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. Councillor Harvey, would you like to speak as seconder?
No, thank you. I think Councillor Dowsey has summed it up. Thank you.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Shepherd.
I agree with what you say, and the fact that this was brought to us as an enforcement item. And I think it's worth us discussing at some stage what we can set up to discourage people from following our processes, which everyone else has to do. So I don't know how to say that we're going to do that, but I would like to suggest that we discuss this further around how we can discourage people building and then asking for our forgiveness.
Thank you, councillor Shepherd. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Dowsey, would you like to sum up?
Nothing further.
If I'll put it to the vote, all those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 11.6 is PP 240100 for 243 Beechworth Road. Beechworth, Wodonga Road, Beechworth.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Dowsey.
I would like to move an alternate motion for this item.
Go ahead, Councillor Dowsey.
My alternate motion reads as follows: that council, having considered the relevant matters, determines to issue a notice of decision to refuse planning permit application PP 240100 on the following grounds. 1, the proposal is inconsistent with purpose, objectives and strategies within clause 14.01/1S, protection of agricultural land. 2, the proposal is inconsistent with purpose, objectives and strategies within clause 14.01/1L/03, land use in the rural zone. 3, the proposal is inconsistent with purpose and decision guidelines within the farming zone. 4, the proposal is inconsistent with the purpose and objectives of the significant landscape overlay Schedule 2.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsey. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Burke. Councillor Dowsey.
Excuse me, could I just
Councillor Shepherd.
could I foreshadow that if this doesn't get up, that
You return to the
that
recommendation.
we return to the recommendation in the agenda? Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Dowsey, would you like to speak to your motion?
I would, thank you. Once again, the recommendation offers no repercussion for knowingly circumventing a defined legislated process. I understand this property had a planning permit that expired in 2011, so it can be assumed the applicant knew the proper process to follow. Some residents in our Shire incur significant costs in the tens of thousands of dollars following the proper defined process, whether that be engaging consultants, designers, or simply through the incursion of rent to live somewhere else or the loss of future investment revenue, whilst waiting up to 18 months for planning permits to be processed. I followed a similar process to the previous item that I talked to, so I reviewed the objections. For this item, there was one objection. I considered, the same as before, whether the concerns were valid reasons for refusal or for conditions. In this case, I do consider the objector's concerns on vegetation removal to be valid. There is no consideration in the recommendation of the vegetation that has been illegally removed in order to construct the dwelling. It appears there are little to no efforts to protect native vegetation at the site. Were the proper process followed, I highly doubt I would have accepted over 20 native trees be removed for the construction of the dwelling. My next consideration is whether this is an appropriate use for the zone, so in this case, the farming zone. In this case, I substantially disagree with the recommendation. Council has a long history of limiting dwelling developments on small farming zone lots under 40 hectares, similar to the subject site. The assertion that the site is unsuitable for farming purposes is flawed. There are several potential farming uses for marginal agricultural sites. The report comments, and I'll quote, "While minor agricultural use such as beekeeping might be possible, the size of the land means that uses would not be commercially viable. Commercial viability is not part of the decision guidelines for the farming zone and has not been considered when assessing other applications of this nature in the farming zone. I will not approve a planning permit for the construction of a dwelling on this property located in the farming zone under 40 hectares in size."
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. Councillor Burke, would you like to speak as seconder?
I just agree I totally agree with Councillor Dowsley's view. I think the concept or the thought or the intention to go ahead and do something and then get retrospective planning permits is something we should discourage enormously if we want to have a robust planning system.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Shepherd.
Could I ask a question of Mr. Pinkerton, Director of Planning and Corporate Services? What will happen if this isn't approved?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Through you, Madam Mayor. If it's not approved, then the dwelling which is started or possibly complete has no planning right to be there. And without a planning approval, there would be no building approval either. So council would then just proceed with enforcement action under both planning and building.
So it will be pulled down?
Yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention that bit. Yes, the without a right there, the house would need to go.
Councillor Shepherd, would you like to speak to the motion or just the question?
Yeah, no, I would. I do agree that we do not support, I call it sort of cowboy, I suppose, planning, where people build something and then our enforcement has to come in afterwards. And I agree with your discussion around removal of trees. I don't agree. This is one sliver of farming zone in amongst rural living. It's right on the edge of town. I know people that live next door. I've been to their place. It is just granite rock. I don't know what you could farm on it. So even though it's farming zone, I think it's really to our the council really has left a little bit of farming zone land in amongst rural living, and I think it's appropriate to have a dwelling in that site as if it was built with a building permit and a building application. The fact that it's we're having to do it retrospectively is annoying, and I'm concerned how we would enforce all the different things that we say he has to do when he's already living in it. So that is that's something I would like an answer to. How do we enforce that all the expectations around well, there's a whole list of things to make it livable. But I'm also not keen to pull down somebody's house. If we can work with them to bring that up to standard, I would be happy to support an application for that area. So even though, as I said, it is farm zone. So I don't agree. I don't think we should be pulling down people's houses if they're willing to do the work. My concern is, though, how we can enforce that the work be done so that we can feel comfortable that we are doing this, approving it, and then retrospectively, the work has to be done to bring it up to standard. I would much prefer to have perhaps deferred this and discussed with them how to bring it up to scratch. But we've got this motion on the table, so I just don't agree with us pulling it down. I think we should be working with the applicant to bring it up to standard. And I'm just going to assume that our planning department's able to do that.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? I have real difficulty with this one because I agree with Councillor Dowsley and Councillor Burke, the fact that these processes are in place for a reason. These zonings are set for a reason. Sometimes people can point to areas where perhaps the zone is no longer appropriate, but that doesn't mean that that provides opportunity for people to be able to just completely ignore the system and build a dwelling in a zone that requires a permit when, as you say, they absolutely knew that that's what was required, having previously obtained a permit like that in the past. I think that we do need to send a really strong message to people that try and do these sorts of behaviour, because we don't know what's been built there. We don't know if it's appropriate. That's what all of these different processes are in place for. But is refusal too strong for me? I think it is. I think that similarly to Councillor Shepherd, I'm more inclined to have confidence in our planning staff to be able to enforce the appropriate conditions retrospectively, and to be able to do as best they can to bring this this site up to where it should have been, to comply with planning permit conditions and building conditions that it should have been subject to. So I'm not happy about it. I don't think that that's something that we should allow, let alone encourage, because they have skipped all of the important steps in terms of why, where and when a house should be built and why it should be built there. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'm going to put it to the vote. Before I do that, I'm going to, oh, sorry, I do need to come back to you, Councillor Dowsley, to sum up.
Thank you. Look, I understand what you're saying. I think calling it someone's house or home is a motive. This is a structure that does not have planning approval, does not have building approval, and does not have occupancy approval. So to call it a home or a house, I think is quite a motive. It's a structure that's not authorised. I understand what you're saying around, it's already been built, but for me, that forms part of the issue. We have no knowledge of what vegetation has been removed to put that structure there illegally. It's clear that the site is heavily vegetated. It's clear that vegetation has been removed. But they're now proposing, even with the building already being built, that an additional 20 trees need to be removed to make it CFA compliant. Would this have been approved prior to construction had we known that in excess of 20 trees, native trees, were going to have to be removed? I think this is an approval or a decision whereby we're being clouded by the fact that the structure's already there. That's just my personal opinion, and I'll stand by my motion.
So I'm going to put it to the vote. Just in terms of process, councillors, this current motion that I'll be asking you to vote on is a refusal motion. So when I ask for all those in favour, you'll be voting for refusal, or if you or you can vote against the refusal. We also know that Councillor Shepherd has foreshadowed that should this motion fail, that she would return to a motion that is the recommendation within the papers. So at this stage, I'll put Councillor Dowsley's refusal motion to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried. So the councillors that voted for the motion is Councillor Harvey, Horn, Dowsley and Burke. Those against were Price, Shepherd, Landells. The motion is carried. Item 11.7 is PA 240180 Old Stanley Road, Stanley. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that council resolves to issue a notice of decision to refuse a planning permit for use and development of land for a dwelling at 261 Old Stanley Road, Beechworth, for the following reasons. The proposal is inconsistent with purpose, objectives and strategies within clause 13.041S, contaminated and potentially contaminated land. The proposal is inconsistent with purpose, objectives and strategies within clause 14.011S, protection of agricultural land. The proposal is inconsistent with purpose, objectives and strategies within clause 14.011L03, land use in the rural zones. The proposal is inconsistent with purpose and decision guidelines within farming zone, and the proposal is inconsistent with purpose and decision guidelines within environmental significance, ESO 1, high quality agricultural land. To have somebody to move that. Councillors, do I have somebody to move that motion? Moved Councillor Dowsley, seconded Councillor Landells. Councillor Dowsley.
Similar to the previous item, this application is for a planning permit for a dwelling in the farming zone on a lot under 40 hectares. The proposal received one objection. I do consider the objector's concerns relating to the requirement of the landowner to live on site and artificially increasing the price of zoned farming land to be valid in the context of this application. In regard to whether the proposed use is acceptable within the farming zone, in this case, I substantially agree with the recommendation. Council has a history of limiting dwelling developments on small farming lots as defined by our planning scheme. This would have been well known to the applicant when they purchased this small farming allotment.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. Councillor Landells, would you like to speak as seconder?
Yes, thank you. I think it's firstly, I think it's great. Very familiar with the Stanley area, and I think it's really important that agricultural projects and initiatives are encouraged. Obviously, there's been a lot of bulldozing in recent years and people removing fruit trees and orchards and that kind of thing. So it's good to see a project like this on proposed, but I also can't get past the fact that it is inconsistent with our planning guidelines within the farming zone, and our planners have recommended that it's not essential that a dwelling be on that property, and I'm persuaded to go with that advice.
Thank you, Councillor Landells. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Burke.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I support the recommendation to refuse this planning application because it doesn't meet the rules for building a house in a farming zone, and the rules were established for a reason. The land is too small, less than 40 acres, and the applicant hasn't shown a good reason why they need to live on the property for farming. A small allotment like this doesn't need 24/7 attendance. There are no live animals. It just doesn't need 24/7 attendance. The farming zone is meant to protect good farmland and stop small blocks from being used for housing. There are also other problems. Part of the land is known to be contaminated, which could be unsafe or bad for the environment. The land is also in areas with special rules. Once again, there are rules to protect it from bushfires and to look after the environment. The plan doesn't show how these risks will be managed properly. Council officers have recommended refusing the application, and I agree. We have planning rules for a reason, to protect farmland, the environment, and the safety of future residents. This proposal doesn't meet all those rules, so it's not the right kind of a development for this land.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Shepherd.
I struggle with farming zone in Stanley. I'm supportive of farming families creating good agricultural outcomes in our shire, and it works when farming families come back to extend and grow a farming business. The Powell's business is also the type of agricultural business that I want in the Stanley region. I want intensive horticulture happening in that space. I want it to be something that brings income into Stanley and brings people from way outside of our shire who all go up to the Powell's and buy their trees throughout the year. So I understand that this does not fit within our planning strategies, that farm zone shouldn't have a house in under 40 hectares. But I also think it's unreasonable for us to expect farming families, when people want to come back and extend the farm and grow it and invigorate it with youth, that we expect them to live somewhere else. We know that's not going to happen. We know they're not going to live in Beechworth. There's nowhere to live in Beechworth. I don't know where they would have to live in Wodonga, which is where many of our young farming families end up. So even though I understand that these are our rules, that we can't have housing under 40 hectares, and we've got that as a strategy. I am very reluctant to vote for this refusal because I really want that farm to be extended and I really want invigorated farming in Stanley. And in an area where there is contaminated land, the best thing to do is to grow trees, I would have thought. So I don't know what other farming you expect to happen there. The other thing is we refused a planning permit earlier on that particular site, which really is odd in that the Powers were then able to buy it with the cost of farming land rather than the cost of land that has a building permit attached, which we all know when you buy farming land, it's a lot cheaper. So I know I'm contradicting myself, but I still see the fact that that farming land is best used for the Powers farming trees, and I really would love to see young families come back and invigorate farming establishments and invigorate and innovate. So if that means somehow helping them get a small area that they can build a house on, then I'm really keen for that to happen. But I can see that our planning laws do not allow it at the moment. So it's a very, very reluctantly that I'm going to have to vote for this.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to you, Councillor Dowsley. Would you like to sum up?
Yeah, look, I do agree with some of the comments that Councillor Shepherd is making. I do believe that this sort of intensive agriculture is something that we do want to promote in Stanley. I completely see the sense of that. However, we have constraints within our planning scheme. We've already talked at length about reviewing the planning scheme, and perhaps this is another item that we need to look at reviewing is intensive farming on small lots in the Stanley area, and whether the farming zone is applicable for that area, I'm not sure. But as it currently stands, I don't see how this can proceed within the context of the current planning scheme.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. Councillors, I will put this decision to a vote. It is to refuse the planning permit. All those in favour? Those against? And the item is carried. Those who voted for the item are Councillor Harvey, Horn, Dowsley, Price, Burke, Landells. Those against, Councillor Shepherd. The motion is carried. Item 11.8 is PP 200060 and PP 220030 Gurumata Road, Rutherglen. The item is...
Mayor, excuse me, could I offer an alternate motion, please?
Yes, Councillor Shepherd.
That council, having considered the relevant matters, determines to issue a notice decision to refuse planning permit application PP 240100 on the following grounds. The proposal is inconsistent with purpose, objectives and strategies within clause 14.01-1S, protection of agricultural land. The proposal is inconsistent with purpose, objectives and strategies within clause 14.01-11103, land use in the rural zones. The proposal is inconsistent with purpose.
Councillor Shepherd, can I just check if this is the correct alternate resolution? It's not the one that I had anticipated that you would raise. Can I just check?
Okay. Sorry. That's the one that I have found. Let me find.
This is the one. I've just sent you the one that you circulated to me earlier today.
Okay, thank you.
Must be something in the water.
There must be something in the water over the side. Do I have to read that all again now? Is that what you're saying? The council, having considered the relevant matters, determines that development plan PP 22-0030 has not been prepared to the satisfaction of the responsible authority and that the application be refused on the following grounds. Oh, yeah. I don't know what the proposed access arrangements are unacceptable, in particular the excessive crossovers to Campbell Street, the use of a cul-de-sac rather than a continuous street, no connectivity to the unmade Williamson Road, and B, the proposal is contrary to the decision guidelines at clause 65.01 of the Indigo planning scheme. In particular, the proposal will have an unacceptable impact on the current and future development of the transport system. The proposal does not represent orderly planning. And 2, the council issue a notice of decision to refuse planning permit PP 20-0060 Gurumata Road, Rutherglen, for subdivision of land in the low density residential zone and environmental significance overlay schedule 3 on the following grounds. The proposed planning permit cannot be granted as there is no approved development plan for the subject site. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Do I have someone to second that motion? Seconded, Councillor Dowsley. Councillor Shepherd, would you like to speak to the motion?
I would. So this previous design was considered by council in its meeting of the 23rd of February 2021, where that previous council resolved that the attached draft development plan be endorsed as an improved development plan for the purpose of section 43.04 of the Indigo planning scheme, subject to the following amendments. Lots 6, 7, 10 and 11 reconfigured to have frontage and access to Williamson's Road only. Inclusion of building envelopes on lots 11 and 12 to provide for habitable buildings to be set back a minimum of 20 metres from the southern boundary. 3, inclusion of a building envelope on lot 13 to provide for habitable buildings to be set back within a minimum setback of 20 metres from the eastern boundary. Number 4, inclusion of a notation requiring the provision of pedestrian links along Williamson Road, Campbell Street, Gurumata Road and Murray Valley Highway to connect with existing pedestrian links to the west. 5, inclusion of a notation requiring Williamson Road to be constructed with the costs borne by the developer to the standard and satisfaction of the responsible authority. And number 6, inclusion of a notation restricting all buildings to be set back a minimum of 5 metres from the boundary lines where no other setback restrictions apply. These changes were not acceptable to the applicant, and it's come back again with no changes. So I'm not of a mind to consider it again and would like to refuse it.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Dowsley, would you like to speak as seconder?
Sure, thank you. At the April council meeting, I moved a motion that council approve a development plan for an 81 lot subdivision at Scott Street in Rutherglen. I commented at the time that the development was designed to integrate with the surrounding residential character, respected the landscape and natural amenity values. I noted that I was satisfied that it was a well-considered development plan for the Shire. I'm not satisfied that this development plan before us now is a well-considered development plan for Rutherglen. I note all of the previous conditions that were recommended or imposed by council that have not been implemented in this development plan that's before us now. I concur that the access arrangements are unacceptable and the plan does not represent best practice planning that I'm looking for future subdivisions in Rutherglen or across the Shire.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Horn.
Yes, I think it's really important that we take great care with these subdivisions because it sets precedents. And with all the development that's going on, we don't want our town to look cluttered or dangerous. And I think both of those issues apply here, particularly with access to the roads. So yeah, I'm aligned with this.
Thank you, Councillor Horn. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Landells.
Yes, I'm wanting to, I guess, speak against the amended motion. So I'm actually in support of the original motion that our planning department put forward to approve it. And I do take some of the points that have been raised, but I also think that this stage 1 has 4 driveways accessing Campbell Street, which isn't a high traffic volume road. And I'm also aware that by approving this stage, it assisted the developer to consider further stages of this particular development. So I think that that is actually a good outcome for for this particular area of Rutherglen.
Councillor Landels, given that this is a planning decision and that you've just given an indication that you might like to support the previous recommendation, can I ask, would you like to foreshadow that should this motion fails, that you would move that first recommendation?
Yes,
Yep.
thank you.
Okay. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? I would like to. I agree with everything that I've heard from Councillor Dowsley, Shepherd, and Horn. Standing on site to view what was proposed, I couldn't understand how it would integrate properly with this site, and I think that we've got some very clear decision guidelines for refusal here. And I think that this is a very strong refusal. I think that we're very clear on what good development looks like, and this does not meet up with what my expectations of that are. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go to Councillor Shepherd if you'd like to sum up.
I think I agree with you. It's a strong refusal. It's been to us before. We didn't think it was good planning outcome at the time. Nothing has changed. And despite Councillor Landau saying there's 4 going out onto Campbell Street, thank you. There's also the others are all going out onto Gurumetta Road, which is a major road. So and as per the other things that I raised, I think this needs to be looked at again.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. I'll put it to the vote. This is a motion for refusal, councillors. All those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried. Councillor Harvey, Horn, Dowsley, Price, Shepherd, Burke voted for the refusal. Councillor Landels voted against. Item 12 is Community and Economic Development, and item 12.1 is the Public Art Advisory Panel. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council 1 endorse the establishment of the Indigo Shire Public Art Advisory Panel. 2, adopt the terms of reference for the Public Arts Advisory Panel. And 3, appoints councillor to the chair of the panel. Can I first ask, do we have any nominations for who might like to be the councillor representative on that panel? Councillor Landels?
Yes, I'd be more than happy to take up that opportunity. Thank you.
Okay, so if there are no other people with interest, I will include Councillor Landell's name within the recommendation and ask if someone would like to move that motion. Moved Councillor Harvey, seconded Councillor Horn. Councillor Harvey.
No, I think Scott will do an admirable job. He's a good person for it. Thank you.
Councillor Landels, would you like to speak as seconder? Sorry, the night is getting away from me. Councillor Horn, you were the seconder. My apologies. Councillor Horn, would you like to speak as seconder?
No, I will hand it over to Scott. Thank you.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Landels.
Yep, I just wanted to say that I think it's great. It's great that we have this public art policy, and I think it's really important to have accountability and a process when commissioning public art projects. So I'm sure that'll be something I look forward to getting my teeth into. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Landels. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 12.2 is the Country Football Netball Program 2025. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council 1 endorses the following projects for a funding application to Sport and Recreation Victoria's Country Football and Netball Program 2025. A, Colston Park Tangambalanga Sports Lighting. B, Waganya Recreation Reserve Sports Lighting. And 2, notes that if funding applications are successful, Council's financial contributions stated below to these projects will be included in the 26-27 budget. A, for $10,000 for the Colston Park Tangambalanga Sports Lighting. B, $20,000 for the Waganya Recreation Reserve Sports Lighting. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Burke, seconded Councillor Dowsley. Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I support this this motion, and I've had some involvement in in looking at opportunities for the football club, and I also want to, because this motion includes funding for the Kiwa Sandy Creek Football and Netball Club Oval. It's a good opportunity to just talk about the football club and what it's been doing in the community to raise funds. So the lights at Colston Park were upgraded in 2016, but they're now worn out and no longer safe or up to AFL standards. So the night games are a huge part of the local footy season, and it's important that they continue and they bring players, families and the whole communities together. What really stands out here is the club's leadership. They're not just asking council to fix the problem, they're stepping up with their own money to help pay for the upgrade and contribute to this project. And that's thanks to their very strong financial management and impressive fundraising. So this lighting upgrade will support more night footy games, get more kids and juniors playing through Auskick and junior footy, grow women's and girls football, support the cricket club and its female players, cut energy bills with modern lights, and of course cut the energy, the power usage, and enable other sporting and fitness groups to use the park at night also. And in emergencies, the oval is used for air ambulance landing. So I think it's a great project, and whilst it's planned for 26, 27, we think that I think that they may be able to bring that forward into early calendar year 2026. So I commend the motion to the council.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Councillor Dowsley, would you like to speak as seconder?
Yeah, thank you. Just a really brief comment. When I first read the title of this program, the Country Football Netball Program, my initial reaction was, oh, what about all those other projects that we've got that are higher on the prioritisation list that apply to football netball clubs across the Shire? And I just want to reassure those clubs and those members of the community out there that yes, your projects are definitely on the list. In this particular example, the criteria for this grant were quite limited, and we've gone with the projects that meet the criteria that are on the list. So this does not mean that your project is not a priority to us. It just means that these particular projects fit the grant criteria in this particular circumstance.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. I'd add to that and say, when you look at the report in the discussion section and it talks about where we've previously been successful, it shows just how limited what we can apply for through this grant is, because in 2024, Barnawartha got sports lighting. In 2021, Buxton Park got sports lighting. In 2020, Barclay Park got sports lighting. And in 2016, Colston Park got sports lighting. So it shows that the state government funding opportunities for sport and rec, let alone country football, netball, are not keeping pace with the cost of things. And really, perhaps this grant funding opportunity should just be renamed to the Country Football Netball Lighting Fund, because I don't understand what else we could possibly fund that is of significance and of priority for our country football netball clubs. And so I'm pleased that we can put forward a couple of projects, but it is a very limited fund. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? No, I'll go back to Councillor Burke if you'd like to sum up.
Nothing more to add. Thanks, Mayor.
I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 12.3 is Community Development Grants, Guidelines and Assessment Criteria Annual Review.
Mayor, can I please move an amended motion for this one?
You can, Councillor Dowsley, if you'd like to read the whole motion with what your addition is. It won't be an amendment, it will be a motion.
Sure. So I'm proposing the following motion: that council adopts the guidelines and assessment criteria as attached to this report for the following grant streams for 2025-26. 1, Indigo Shire Community Grants Program. 2, Indigo Shire Get Active Indigo Grants Program. 3, Indigo Shire Events Grants Program. That council directs the CEO to conduct a review of the Indigo Shire Grants Governance Policy to ensure alignment with the council vision and council plan.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Seconded, Councillor Horn. Councillor Dowsley, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, sure. Look, this was kind of alluded to during open forum, actually. I think the CEO mentioned it. So tonight we adopted our council plan and community vision. We heard the importance of these documents in setting our strategic direction, guiding our future operational and capital budgets, and setting annual action plans. All of the strategic objectives contained in the council plan are equally important to me. However, there are several strategic objectives whereby related projects may align with one of our grant programs, but shouldn't necessarily have to. Some of these examples are township character and heritage, creative communities, housing diversity and development, sustainable tourism development, business and investment support, and heritage preservation. I believe that any community project that aligns to the community vision and council plan is worthy of consideration for a grant. Given the timing and the current expectations from our community regarding the opening of these grants, I will endorse tonight's motion. However, I'll seek the addition to the motion to ensure a review of the grants policy is conducted, hopefully ready for the next financial year, to ensure alignment with our council plan. And part of that review can also include the makeup of the assessment panels, as was discussed in the open forum.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. Councillor Horn, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, I would. I'm delighted to hear Councillor Rowsley's review of grants policy, because when I looked at this situation, I was quite surprised, because at the heart of particularly the Get Active Indigo program, there's a clear and compelling goal to get more people active more often. So I'm wondering why we're proposing to remove community representatives from the panel that helps assess this very program. It doesn't seem to align with me. It doesn't seem to support the objective. In fact, I think that it contradicts it. I believe that by removing community members from Indigo panels undermines the very purpose, in particular, of this grant to empower and energise communities. If we strip away community voices, how can we expect to build participation, trust, or relevance? There has been no evidence of failure, no breach of process or efficiency, so this change feels a little arbitrary to me. And I wonder if it does constitute good governance. I'd like to, let's not replace the insight with oversight, I've written. Let's lead by example set by our long-standing Community Grants Committee and keep the community where it belongs, at the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horn. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Shepherd.
These grants deliver a huge amount of value adding to our council. We may only give $5,000 or $6,000 to each group, 10,000 max, I suppose. But they then add their in-kind and all their volunteer work and their own money to create amazing events, sustainability, infrastructure works, active events for community members to get them out and about. I think the people closest to the community are creating things that probably are lower cost than what we would if we had to try and organise it by the time we had to do all the work around our strategies and all the extra things. So I think it's really good that we hand this money to the community. I think we've really done a good job over the years in cleaning these up. They used to be given at different times of the year. You used to have to do it via paper application. It's now done through Smarty grants. We now try and make them at a similar time. They're all under one terms of reference. I think we are slowly creating great governance under these, but I think the community have always been spending it wisely, and I'm always excited to see what they do with that money. So I understand that always with the new council, it's you want to review and have a look and put yourself into this space and see what you can do to improve them. And I'm certainly supportive of that. But I'd also like to say thank you to the staff who have created this better system than what it was. And I look forward to these going out to the community and seeing what they come up with.
Thank you, councillor Shepherd. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Landels.
Yes, thank you. So I sit on a couple of these committees, the Community Grants Committee and also the Active Indigo Committee. And in my, I suppose I've had eight months of sitting on these committees. I would like to echo the comments of Councillor Horn and Councillor Shepherd about the amazing value that community members bring to these committees. And I'm a little bit puzzled with the Active Indigo Committee about why we're seeking to remove one of the community members. The reason given here is to strengthen governance and improve assessment quality. I can only comment on the meetings I've attended. That community person has probably been the strongest person around the table when it comes to those particular matters. So I realise that could just be specific to that particular individual, and that, in normal circumstances, perhaps there may be some, you may not always get the consistency or in governance areas or the strength that we're looking for, but certainly in the practical example of how that has worked with the Active Indigo Committee, I can't really see any, as I say, that person's probably the strongest person around the table when it comes to those particular matters. And yes, there certainly is a huge multiplier effect from these type of grants. They are they're investments in community. They help to build community, and they also and the benefits just in the different areas, whether it be events, community grants, or Active Indigo, they just have that multiplier effect through the community of people getting active, and also we've commented on this before, that Indigo Shire probably has one of the highest rates of volunteering within the state, and I think it's a real strength of ours. And yeah, it's great that we're putting $140,000 for the next 12 months into this particular area. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Landels. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to Councillor Dowsey. Would you like to sum up?
No, thanks. I think we've covered it.
I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 13, Infrastructure Services, 13.1 Community Sustainability Grant Program Guidelines Annual Review 2025-26. The item is for decision. Recommendation is that Council 1 adopts the guidelines for the Community Sustainability Grants Program for 2025-26 attached, and 2 delegates to the Chief Executive Officer to appoint 2 representatives from the Indigo Environment Advisory Committee to be on the Community Sustainability Grants Program Assessment Panel. Do I have somebody to move that?
Could I ask a question before it's moved? One of the good things about those other 3 grants is they're all under the one heading, the one department. They're all, they work together. They're all, I've often wondered then that this.
I think this is part of the debate. I thought it was a question of clarity around.
Well, it is. I'm getting there.
Yeah, but let's move it first, and we'll get into the debate then, because I think that can be part of the debate.
Right. Move it.
You happy to move it? Do we have a seconder? Seconded, Councillor Dowsey. Councillor Shepherd.
I think this is a great grant, and I think we started probably about 10 years ago, something like that. Maybe I've gone a bit crazy. It's probably more like 7. And I think over those 7 years, we've got some great outcomes, which all can be seen on the, is it causal web page? That our previous officer kept updated with photos and all the different activities and projects that the community had done under this grant. But I am wondering why this grant is separate from the others. The others are all under community development and this is under infrastructure. I get that they, you know, a little bit different, but really they're all funding to the community with just different guidelines and different outcomes expected, but it seems, why wouldn't we have them all working under the same terms of reference and the same Smarty grants applications with the same people running them? I'm just unsure why that. And wondering then whether this should also be included for review with the previous ones.
Councillor Shepherd, would you like to ask that question of the CEO?
I asked that question of the CEO.
CEO.
They are covered under the grants policy. So the overarching governance policy includes this as well. So it is covered by the same policy overall. Look, I don't have an amazing answer for you about why they're separated, but the agenda item, the agenda itself is divided into agenda papers that come through from the specific directorates. So sustainability is within a different directorate from community development, and it's just for that purpose that it comes through the agenda under the infrastructure section because that's where it's based. But I note though that in the agenda papers they run concurrently straight after the others. So we did have the other grants at the tail end of community development, and this was the first item under infrastructure. So it's sort of they just came one after the other. So no real great answer other than they're in different directorates.
Great. Well, that's something we can look at perhaps.
Councillor Dowsley, would you like to speak as seconder?
No, nothing to add.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Shepherd, would you like to sum up? I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 13.2 is the Asset Plan 2025. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council 1 endorses the draft Asset Plan 2025 and places it on public exhibition for 21 days. And 2 notes that a further report will be presented to Council following the public exhibition period for a final decision on the Asset Plan. To have somebody to move that. Moved Councillor Dowsley, seconded Councillor Harvey. Councillor Dowsley.
No, look, I don't have a lot to add for this. We're required to have an asset plan. This is just approving our draft to go out on public exhibition for comment. There's really not much else to say about it.
Councillor Harvey, would you like to speak as seconder?
Nothing to add. Thank you.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Shepherd.
This is our first one, isn't it? Since the 2020. Have we had an asset plan?
Yeah, this is
Oh,
the previous council had done.
previous council.
in its first 6
This one under the new Local Government Act, is it? Is it hasn't? Oh, okay. Oh, I just thought it was. It seemed to be more expecting to be community focused and clear in scope and definition and simple to understand. I thought it seemed to have more push for that this time, but maybe not. Maybe not. So. Well, I've got nothing to add then. This is going out to the community. Hopefully they'll be able to understand it because that's one of the clear expectations of this asset plan, that the community can understand what our assets are and how we manage them.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Reading from the conclusion, it did, I think it does speak well to the fact that what the asset plan is designed to do is a document that communicates the importance and magnitude of the infrastructure assets for which council is the custodian. And I think that we need to use more of those words when we try and describe that to the community, because I don't think that is very clearly understood, the importance and the magnitude of our infrastructure assets. People understand them, understand the assets that we have as halls or roads or other pieces of infrastructure, and when you give them their own category. It doesn't really speak to the volume of assets that we do have and the effort that it takes to plan appropriately to keep all of those assets in good condition. So I hope that we can spark some interest in this asset plan in the community, because it is a very important document for us. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I go back to you, Councillor Dowsey. Would you like to sum up?
No, thank you.
I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 13.3 is the road and place naming policy. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council 1 endorses the attached draft road and place naming policy 2025 for the purposes of public exhibition for a minimum period of 28 days. And 2, notes that a further report will be presented to Council following the public exhibition period for the policy to be adopted. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Shepherd, seconded Councillor Burke. Councillor Shepherd.
Okay, so this is our first one. Yep. And we have struggled a couple of times when we've gone to name roads, and it was really difficult without having some sort of strategic sort of outline as to how to go forward. And we found ourselves debating things that we probably didn't need to debate. It's great to have this draft road and place naming policy with its different expectations. The naming principles are covered. Oh, sorry. I thought I was saying something wrong again. So we're the naming authority for roads and places, and we have to name, the naming rules have to be acceptable to the Register of Geographic Names Victoria, and that includes recognising public interest, linking the name to place, making sure names are not duplicated, recognising use of traditional owner languages, gender equity, using commemorative names, language, directional names to be avoided. So all of those are included in this framework. And we now have a way of moving forward when we are looking to name a place or a road or a park or whatever. And we are setting up, as part of that, a public, got to find the acronym, PAAP, I think it is, a committee that will, when I can find it, no? Yeah, where does it say about it? Okay, so we're setting up a committee who will be in charge of these guidelines, and when we are looking to find names from the community, this group will have hopefully a bank of names that we'll be able to use. Is that correct? I think I've botched that. But yeah, okay, great. So instead of councillors debating it, we will have a group of people who will be able to outline these particular expectations, and they will bring to us some names for us to choose within these guidelines, which will make things a lot easier for councillors. So this is going out for community, though, to give feedback. So love to hear what people think about it.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Burke, would you like to speak as seconder?
No, nothing.
I'd just like to add that I'll come to you, Councillor Horn. This is definitely something that we had been lacking, and we had pointed to the need for this policy. And quite often when we point to the need for this policy, we say, CEO, how long will this take? And this has come quite quickly, I must say. So I want to say thank you to the staff that have worked on this policy, namely Adam Kimball, because I appreciate him being able to bring it to us with such clarity, and also the fact that staff have been able to guide us through while we have not had a policy, in recent times when this has come up. So I appreciate them being able to point us to a good point of reference when we didn't have a policy, but I also appreciate how quickly this policy has come to us and thank the staff for working on that. Councillor Horn.
I just wanted to say that we're very fortunate. We have some people within, particularly in the Rutherglen community, who I know are very interested in our historic and Aboriginal areas of expertise, and they contribute greatly to this naming policy. We had one situation where the three names, that if you sat down to think of the worst names that you could pull out of a project, they were right there. They were right there. So it was unbelievable. So as I was saying, I'm very glad that we have people to guide us, and yeah, we'll have some happy outcomes in future.
Thank you, Councillor Horn. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to you, Councillor Shepherd. Would you like to sum up?
I'd like to, now that I've found the PNC, I'd like to just give the outline of that. It will have the role of evaluating any proposals submitted by community or developer against the naming rules in this policy. They will provide recommended names for roads and places proposed to be named, and they will have the responsibility for the development and maintenance of a name bank. At the moment, that place naming committee is someone from assets and property, someone from community development, creative communities, someone from planning, someone from the Burke Museum, and others as considered appropriate, which I think we discussed. If it was a particular region or area, it would be good to have perhaps someone from that particular area to reflect community interest in that space. So, yeah, a first one, and hopefully we've got it right, but interested in getting it going and seeing how it works.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 13.4 is the Capital Works report for May 2025. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council notes the May 2025 Capital Works report and year-to-date progress in the delivery of the Capital Works program. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Burke, seconded Councillor Dowsley. Councillor Burke.
Yes, thanks, Madam Mayor. The only comment I'd make on this is on the program delivery. Having been involved in capital projects for most of my executive life, when you read something like this in the last month of the year, there is a risk that several projects will only commencing in June due to delays with securing supplies, particularly steelwork and roofing items, which will impact on our delivery targets. I just want to say I feel your pain. I feel your pain. There is nothing worse than having a full year's projects all lined up. You're trying to hit the numbers, and it doesn't. So, if you do get 1.6 million delivered in the last month of the financial year, that's a $20 million run rate, an annual run rate. So that's pretty good if you get there. So, yeah, I understand this is the time of the year when, I don't know, so many people, engineering people would come up to me in my time and they'd sit there and go, so why do I have to hit the 30th of June? Why can't I hit the 15th of July? And I just say, well, that's what we plan to do and that's what you're going to do. And of course they never did it because it's things that are out of their control. So I'm not suggesting, CEO, that they can sit back and take a holiday. I'm just sharing the pain, feeling the pain, because it's sometimes you can have unrealistic numbers at this stage of the year. So it'll be interesting to see how close you got anyway. That's all I can say.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Councillor Dowsley, would you like to speak as seconder?
Yeah, sure. Just some brief commentary. Obviously, as Councillor Burke has indicated, getting very close to the end of the financial year. The report commentary tells us that the program is 90% complete, but it's important to note that this is based on total spend versus actual spend comparison. It doesn't actually tell us what's happening at the project level. So within that 90% completion, there are some projects, as Councillor Burke indicated, that have not started yet or may not finish yet. And there's also a few projects in there that are running over budget. So I am slightly concerned by the number of projects that seem unlikely to be completed by June 30. And I'm concerned about a further increase to our carry forward, which was 4.14 million at the Q2 budget review. So I very much look forward to reviewing my first end of year reports as a councillor soon.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to you, Councillor Burke. Would you like to sum up?
Good luck on getting the number.
I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 14 is Office of the CEO, and item 14.1 is the Council Law Internal Resolution Procedure. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council approves the attached Councillor Internal Resolution Procedure. Can I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Shepherd, seconded Councillor Landells. Councillor Shepherd.
So this procedure went out, we sent it out at the last council meeting, and it's come back with no comments from the community, which is understandable because it's pretty much an internal councillor code of procedure really, and it's designed to provide an internal mechanism for resolving alleged breaches of the model councillor code of conduct before matters are escalated to formal processes such as internal arbitration. So encouraging us to have discussion, respectful dialogue, conciliation with a facilitated resolution process generally led by the Mayor, with administrative support from the Councillor Conduct Officer. So pretty common sense really. Let's talk about things early on, and here's the guidelines before it gets bigger and more expensive.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Landells, would you like to speak as seconder?
Yes, thanks. I guess it's a procedure, and there's a fair bit of theory associated with it, and I guess it's just have to see how it goes when if it's tested at some point, how well the procedure works. But it's obviously one of those really important guiding procedures for, I guess at this stage, a hypothetical situation, but more, it's something that we have to have in place because that these situations can arise, and it's really important that we're not making up the procedure on the run.
Thank you, Councillor Landells. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Horn.
This item is the result of recent amendments to the Local Government Act 2020. It's clear in its intent to guide respectful interaction between councillors and staff, and yes, respect is vital. But I cannot support this policy because it risks creating more harm than harmony. I oppose its adoption for three key reasons. First, councillors are not salaried bureaucrats. Second, this process can be weaponised. And third, it seems to lack independent oversight. Unlike other levels of government, we are not full-time professionals. We are considered as volunteers who are allocated a modest allowance, performing work of high complexity and responsibility. But this policy asks us to carry the burden of paid executives, legal exposure, reputational risk, and emotional strain, with no legal defence, no formal support, and limited attention to our well-being. I think this isn't fair. This procedure allows a staff member to lodge a complaint without requiring any external review. No natural justice, no legal recourse, and complaints are managed by the Mayor and internal officers who may be colleagues of the complainant. Where is the transparency? Where is the impartiality? Our community expects us to ask the hard questions, to scrutinise and to challenge. But this policy creates fear that doing our job might be seen as misconduct, fear that questioning a process may be treated as disrespect. Disagreement is not misconduct, and accountability is not aggression. We must absolutely hold ourselves to high standards, but this policy goes too far, in my opinion. It demands too much of councillors and protects too few. I urge you to vote no because we oppose standards, not because we oppose standards, but because we uphold fairness, because we defend natural justice, and because we believe robust governance is built on balance, not fear.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? I have to say, councillor, that is not my reading of what this does. This is a fairly simple procedure to follow at very early stages where you're trying to help councillors who might be in dispute. I think that there are many more heavy-handed avenues, if people would like them, that are publicly reported on, that have the full weight of the law and the full weight of different authorities of local government. I think what this is talking about is it's within the scope. It says this procedure is for councillors. It's for disputes between councillors, and I think that it does outline that quite well. But there are so many more avenues that I have seen people use when and where is required in these situations. So this is just another opportunity, and I think it's a good suggestion for us to try and resolve things ourselves first, because every other stage is an escalation. And what I've seen with anyone who has undertaken these processes is you can escalate and escalate and escalate, and still at the end of the day, you're asked to try and bring it back to a position where you can resolve disputes yourselves. So really, that is the best place to start. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to Councillor Shepherd. Would you like to sum up?
Yes. If I could just read, the first stage is a complainant is encouraged to raise their issue directly with the respondent in a respectful and courteous manner, either in person or in writing, where they feel comfortable to do so. And councillors are encouraged to recognise that certain behaviours and communications may be perceived by others to be causing issues or offence, and it can provide useful insight to reflect on their own behaviour or motivation. I think it's just a pretty general reminder to yourself to very early on think about how to respectfully work amongst ourselves and be aware we might be offending. And if someone does feel offended, they've got a way of sending an email or ringing or talking to you. That's what's encouraged right from the very beginning, to have a chat to the person and rather than go straight to a higher body and say that person offended me. So I'm supportive of this, and I think we probably should reflect on it. Not that I think we get on all pretty well, really, and I think we are respectful, and I think we do call each other out if we feel someone's stepping on our toes. But it's good to have it here.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? The motion's carried. Those that voted for it was Councillor Harvey, Dowsley, Price, Shepherd, Burke, Landells. Those against, Councillor Horn. Item 14.2 is the advisory committee minutes. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that council receives the attached unconfirmed meeting minutes for the following advisory committees and endorses the officer recommended actions. For one, the Finance Committee. Can I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Harvey, seconded Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Harvey.
I don't think it's necessary to speak to that. Thank you.
Councillor Shepherd, would you like to speak as seconder?
Just that at that particular Finance Committee, the draft budget was brought to us for discussion, and we approved it with a couple of amendments, and you'll have to read the minutes to see what they are.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to Councillor Harvey. Would you like to sum up? I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 14.3 is informal meeting of councillors record. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that council accepts the attached informal meetings of councillors' records. Can I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Burke, seconded Councillor Horn. Councillor Burke, would you like to speak to the motion?
Nothing required.
Councillor Horn?
No, thank you.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 14.4 is contracts awarded under Chief Executive Officer delegation for May 2025. The item is for information, and there were no contracts awarded by the CEO under delegation between the values of $250,000 and $500,000 for the month of May 2025. Item 15 is notices of motion, which was already brought forward to an earlier item in the agenda. So item 16 is councillor report. Would any councillor like to make a report to the meeting? Councillor Harvey.
On Friday, May the 23rd, I attended the Volunteers Week function at Corcus, Beechworth, and they provided a very nice luncheon. And we gave a couple of speeches. I gave a very short one. The manager of Corcus gave a slightly longer one. And we watched an interesting film on volunteer firefighters in the United States and Austria. And the only disappointment was there weren't more people attending the event. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Would any other councillor like to make a report? Councillor Dowsley.
Thank you, Mayor. Bear with me. On Thursday, the 12th of June, Councillor Horn and myself attended Yakandanda Primary School to listen to speeches prepared by grade 5 and 6 students for the 2025 Parliament Prize competition. The Parliament Prize is a state government initiative whereby students prepare a 90-second member statement, what they would say to Parliament if they were an MP. I went along thinking that this would be a great opportunity to hear from the Shire's youth, which is an opportunity that doesn't come along very often as councillors. I'm not entirely sure what I was expecting, but I was absolutely blown away by the depth and maturity of the topics, including cost of living pressures on their families, homelessness, public transport in rural areas, safety education in schools, road safety, zero waste initiatives, the cost of team sports on families, increasing classroom support for neurodiverse students. I know it's all pretty heavy stuff for 11 and 12-year-olds. I was immensely proud, but to be honest, a touch saddened that our 11 and 12-year-old kids are noticing these pressures on their families and in our society. But one speech in particular hit pretty hard. A grade 6 student, Lara, talked about the time her family had to call an ambulance for her 2-year-old brother, Max. She talked about the impact to Max as he waited in severe pain for over an hour, more like I think an hour, 40 minutes, for the ambulance to arrive. She talked about the impact on herself and her little sister witnessing the event and the stress on her parents. She was advocating for improved ambulance response times in Indigo Shire. She's 12 years old. If a 12-year-old can see there is an issue, why can't the state and federal governments acknowledge we are in a health crisis? I'm tired of the lip service. I'm tired of our Shire being treated like second-rate citizens. It's time for someone to be brave, to stand up and accept that we deserve better. 12-year-old Lara knows it, and we all know it. Susan Lay, Anthony Albanese, it's time you acknowledge it and endorse a new hospital on a new site for Albury Wodonga Health.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley, and thank you for sharing that story with those of us that weren't able to be there as well. It does so adequately highlight the plight of living in the Indigo Shire and relying on ambulance services and health services in this area. Would any other councillor like to make a report to the meeting? Councillor Horn.
I'd just like to say that it was an absolute pleasure to be there on that day, and there's a room full of future leaders there. They're absolutely stunning.
Thank you, Councillor Horn. Item 16.2 is the Mayor's Diary, and that's there for information with the lists of the events, functions and meetings that are attended for May 2025. Item 17 is the Decisions Register. and it's for information outlining actions from council resolutions as at the 13th of May 2025, including those not previously listed. Item 18 is general business. Do any councillors have any items of general business to raise at the council meeting? Councillor Horn?
A question for the CEO. I believe you've had some further information from the government about safety in Main Street, Rutherglen.
Thanks, Councillor Horn. Yes, I got an update on the 19th, so just 4 days ago, so that's last Thursday, from the Department of Transport and Planning, otherwise known as Vic Roads. They've received tenders for the Main Street works in Rutherglen, with tenders recently closing. They're currently evaluating those tenders and are aiming for a July/August start to works, weather permitting, as all the engineers like to say.
Would any other councillor like to raise an item of general business? No, if not, then we'll go to item 19, which is confidential items. And section 66 of the Local Government Act states that a council or delegated committee must keep a meeting open to the public unless the council or delegated committee considers it necessary to close the meeting to the public because a circumstance specified in subsection 2 applies. The circumstances are the meeting is to consider confidential information as defined in section 3 of the Local Government Act for security reasons, or if it is necessary to do so to enable the meeting to proceed in an orderly manner. We have satisfied that criteria, and so I would ask for a motion from a councillor that the council meeting be closed to the public in accordance with section 66 of the Local Government Act 2020. And I'd just note before I ask for that motion that we will consider this item and then come out of the meeting only to close the meeting. So if anyone is watching, that's what the remainder of the meeting will be. So I'll ask for someone to move that motion. Moved Councillor Harvey, seconded Councillor Horn. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. We will now move into confidential session. We have just moved a motion to move out of confidential. So I'd like to now declare the meeting closed at 9:18 p.m. and the next council meeting will be Tuesday, the 29th of July,